Kito, ein Musik-Podcast für zwischendurch. Hi, and welcome to the second Advent episode of 2021 by the Kito podcast. Kito is a student initiative at the Institute for Musicology at University Leipzig. We want to offer insights into the music scene of Leipzig, and with these 4 Advent episodes, we have started to venture out to talk with musicians, scholars, and artists from many different places. This episode was originally supposed to be the 4th one, but we had to reorganize a bit, so you are now able to listen to this 2 weeks early. My name is Schönecke, and I'm currently staying abroad as an exchange student at the Hobart and William Smith colleges in the state of New York, which is also why I'm talking in English right now. Since I arrived here in August, I've been meeting a lot of super interesting people I want to get on the podcast. So I'm really excited to welcome our first American guest, Professor Lenti. Hi.
Hello.
So happy to have you with us.
So glad to be here.
Would you like to introduce yourself a little?
Sure. So, as Barrett said, I'm Professor Lenti, Professor Anna Lenti, and I'm originally from Rochester, New York, which is about an hour away from where we are right now in Geneva, New York. And I grew up there and was part of a family of musicians. Both my parents are piano teachers, and my aunt and uncle play the piano. My cousin's a theorbo player, so a very musical family. I studied vocal performance at the Eastman School of Music, which is a conservatory in Rochester, New York. And then I went on to study choral conducting at Westminster Choir College, which is in Princeton, New Jersey. And after that, I sort of had this hodgepodge career of some conducting and some professional singing, which is where I sang a lot of Bach, mostly in the New York City area, but I sort of toured around with some professional choirs as well. And then I came back to Eastman a couple years ago to start my DMA, my doctorate in choral conducting as well. And that's how I ended up here as a sabbatical leave replacement. This is my final year of my doctorate, and so I'm mostly, I'm not taking any more classes, so I'm writing my dissertation and studying for comprehensive exams, and so I have a little more time to be working. And I had met Bob Cowles, who's the usual director of choral activities here at HWS, while I was conducting the community chorus here, and he asked me to take over for him for this year as his sabbatical replacement, and so here I am, and I teach theory, and I conduct the choirs, and I'm having a great time.
Yeah, and that's also how we met each other. I joined the college's chorale, and I remember as I was auditioning, we already talked about Bach. And That's kind of where I thought, yeah, maybe we can make a podcast out of this. We will come back to a lot of things you just mentioned. Just before we start, a quick COVID disclaimer that we are both fully vaccinated and following the college's guidelines by being masked indoors in public spaces. Now we can fully start. You just mentioned the community chorus, which is different from the college's chorale. What is the difference? What are the ideas behind these ensembles?
So the college's chorale is only students, and it is a curricular class, so there's a grade involved, and I get an official roster. The community chorus is open to anybody. You do have to have an audition of some kind, but almost everybody gets in. And so we have faculty members and staff members and members of the community, and also students can join as well. So they typically have an outside person come and conduct that, I think just sort of in the spirit of reaching out to the community and bringing them into the college a little bit more. And but chorale is usually smaller, and in a normal year we often also have a third ensemble called cantori. But this year our numbers are so small, I think due to, the post-COVID times, that we just have one for now. So normally there's 3 ensembles on campus.
Oh yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. It's so interesting. I actually by chance met someone who sang in the community chorus on day of service.
Oh.
So we were fixing this community garden, and then suddenly we also talked about all kinds of music.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. And I think that's the spirit of it. Is, you run into these lovely people who have the same interests as you, but they might be faculty or, just people from the community. So that's really nice.
You mentioned it just when you introduced yourself, that you have a very musical family, and that's also where you started to come in contact with the piano and with Bach.
Yes. So a really musical family. I think I missed that my sister's also a church organist. And my mother, in addition to being a piano teacher, ended up being a church organist and a choir director as well. So I definitely, we say here, I don't know if you have this expression, like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That is me for sure. But my earliest memories of Bach are definitely at the piano. My dad started teaching me sort of Suzuki style on the piano while my mom taught me how to read music around 5 years old. And then after that, they sent me to a different teacher, so I wasn't studying just with them. But they would sit and practice with me, and I definitely remember being really frustrated by Bach in the beginning. So, I would get assigned a 2-part invention and I would say, I hate this. I don't get it. And my mom would say, just practice very slowly. But what I remember is this sort of pattern that started happening with the pieces where I just wouldn't get it. I wouldn't get it. I wouldn't get it. And then I would just wake up one day and be able to do it. And it was like this puzzle that sort of fell into place or like all the notes were already out there in the universe and I just sort of had to understand them. And once I did, it was sort of in my body forever. I can go back now and play so many of those pieces still from memory because I think, you really have to learn them by heart in order to know them. So that's really when I fell in love with Bach, was at the piano, and sort of, I think, he was a keyboardist. So to me, that's how I feel like he sometimes expresses himself the best. And so I love that I sort of fell in love with him through that avenue. But now as a singer and conductor have, gotten to see a lot of different sides of him. So.
Yeah. I feel like Bach sometimes goes right into muscle memory.
Yes.
Like when I think back, I stopped playing violin because I focused on viola. And now I have really troubles to play on the right string when I switch back to violin. But the Bach pieces still work very well because they are somehow in the body, in the mind, I don't know.
I agree.
And then you went on to Eastman School, and I already heard a lot, like it's one of the music schools in the US, right?
Yeah, it is. It's, one of the top conservatories. It's usually ranked in like the top 3, depending on how you rank them, I think what makes it unique is that unlike, Juilliard or Curtis or any of those sort of smaller conservatories, this one is affiliated with a larger university. So the Eastman School of Music is part of the University of Rochester, but they are on 2 completely different campuses, about 20 minutes away from one another. So you kind of get the best of both worlds when you go there because if you're an Eastman student, you can take any classes you want at the University of Rochester, or you can do a double degree where you have a degree at the U of R, but also from Eastman. So you can study pre-med or math, but then also get a BM in music from Eastman. But you also get to have this small campus sort of conservatory experience. So it's a really nice balance of those 2 things. And I think like when you ever see Eastman sort of at the top of the lists of conservatories, it's usually because there's so much available to students in terms of, getting sort of a liberal arts education in addition. So yeah, I think it's a really nice place that sort of has this balance of really rigorous conservatory, but also people can study other things.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned that you can really get like 2 degrees. And that's something we don't have that much in Germany. Maybe,
really?
I guess it's teachers who can like have 2 subjects and study education in addition for secondary teaching. And I'm not quite sure if it wouldn't be able, but I personally don't really know anyone who goes into very different directions.
That's so
in their studies. For example, I also met people here who major in music and computer science. And I don't think I've ever met someone in Germany who does that.
So do people, I think one of the reasons, especially with music, that people do it is because they feel like they need a backup plan. Is that not the sense in Germany? Is it like,
I think, some people maybe do some economy stuff on the side because that's maybe a safe route. But most of the time, I think when you go to music school or theater school, that is so time consuming.
Right.
That it's not really possible. And I guess you rather go into a path where you maybe also start with education. I think a lot of people, for example, decide for music, but music education.
Right.
Because that's kind of the safer road to go.
Right.
And then some people add concert diplomas after that. But I'm also not completely sure what diploma does what, because it's a little bit complicated, at least from my perspective, because you can always also study an educational road that doesn't go into schools, but like being an instrumental teacher or instructor is a different diploma than a concert diploma.
Gotcha.
But some people also don't really care afterwards and are like private instructors anyway.
Right.
So it's just a lot of different ways and paths you can take. I guess it's probably similar here. Like there's not one road you can take.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, so...
Yeah, you're the best example.
I mean, yeah, I like, people are always surprised to learn that I didn't have a music education degree because I ended up teaching in high school, you know, but... Yeah, I think there's many ways to be a musician, for sure, and degrees don't always reflect, you know, what you know, which is interesting.
Before you went on to teaching, we will come back to that as well, you sang professionally in New York City.
Yes.
That's one of the main reasons why I thought you would be perfect for this podcast, because you focused on Bach. And that's also a perfect connection to our one episode we had pretty much 1 year ago. In December, where we had another Bach expert, and you can kind of fill in the performance aspect,
Sure.
which I'm very excited. So yeah, tell us all about it.
Sure. It's still maybe my favorite thing I've ever done professionally. So when I moved to New York, it was an interesting decision because I just finished this choral conducting degree and I really wanted to be a conductor, but there was sort of, you know, the path to take is to get a job teaching high school first, and then you go back and you get your doctorate. But I didn't have certification because I didn't have a music education degree. So I would have had to find a job in a private school. And I really wanted to move to New York City because I just felt like the music scene there was so exciting. But getting a private school job there is really hard. And so I had made some connections while I lived in Princeton for my master's. Princeton's about an hour and a half away from New York City. So I had been traveling in there to do a few professional choir gigs. And once you know one professional choir roster, you know everybody. It's kind of the same people. So through that experience, I got some auditions and I ended up auditioning for this Bach Choir at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. And I ended up, after being in New York City for a year, being their first call soprano. So at Holy Trinity, we do a Bach cantata every Sunday from October through April. And we do it in the context of Lutheran Vespers liturgy, like as Bach would have done it, with all of the period instruments. So, you know, instruments are at 4:15, and we use harpsichord and organ and all those things. And basically the rehearsal schedule was really intense. So we'd get there on Saturday and sort of be handed the cantata, and we would rehearse Saturday morning, take a break for lunch, Saturday afternoon, and then come perform it on Sunday. And then we'd perform a whole bunch of other music as well in addition to the cantata. The cantata would happen sort of in its normal space in the liturgy right before the sermon, or sometimes on either side of the sermon. But then we would also perform, you know, some of the other Bach family motets or some Praetorius, some other German tradition music throughout the service. We had a lot of music to learn, but only one day to learn it. And it was so much fun. And I felt like in the beginning, you know, I was studying this music all week long, trying to get ready. And by the end, I would sort of walk in on Saturday and be like, which one are we doing today? You know, so you sort of get used to Bach's language, and it was so much fun. And all the musicians, because we perform Bach so often, I just feel like you get really good at interpreting it and you become sort of this little family. So some of the best music I've ever made was with that group of people. And also I think having a little bit of less rehearsal time sometimes made it more fun because you had to be really spontaneous and really kind of on your toes. So I think we made definitely there were some mistakes that happened, but also some really amazing sort of organic music making.
Yeah, I mean, also that pace is not something we're really used to anymore.
Yes.
But that was what it was like at the time.
Yeah,
every week a new one. Yeah.
Yep.
Also, I mean, for him to write, that's also just... I'm in awe when I think of that. I mean, it was only a few years and not his whole life. Like, it gets told sometimes, but still, it's a lot.
I know, it's a lot. Telemann was even more.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think of the people who were more prolific than Bach.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So after your time in New York, You already mentioned you had a teaching job. Mm-hmm. So how was that transition like, and when was the moment where you were like, yeah, maybe it's something else I want to actually do?
Sure, yeah. So when I was sort of being a freelance musician exclusively, that was I spent about 2 years doing that. And about 1.5 years into it, I started thinking, this is not really what I want to do. There were some really amazing moments, like the Bach ensemble. But the problem with being a full-time musician is you have to say yes to everything. And that means you're saying yes to things that aren't very rewarding. And you're sometimes singing for conductors that you don't enjoy singing for, or your voice gets really tired because you're singing all the time. So I was feeling like I wanted to be in front of the ensemble rather than in it most of the time. So I started looking around for jobs, and I ended up finding this wonderful position out in New Jersey. It's like a 45-minute to an hour drive or a train ride into New York City. And it was teaching at an all-girls middle and high school. We moved out there after I started there. I started by commuting from New York to New Jersey, and then we sort of switched. So I moved out there with my husband, and I taught there for 5 years, and it was so much fun because then I could keep the Bach job because that was just on the weekends. Mm-hmm. So I got to teach during the week and then go on the weekends to sing Bach, and I would take, a few other gigs if I could. Occasionally it would be, only evening rehearsals, so I could, go in and do occasional gigs, but it was only the ones I wanted to sing. So it was sort of this perfect balance. I could teach music, but also, sort of feed my artistic soul at a higher level when I needed to. So it was a nice balance.
Yeah, it's nice to have both worlds.
Yes.
I guess. I mean, I thought about doing music education as well, but I had the fear kind of losing the enthusiasm if you stand in front of people who are maybe not as enthusiastic about it all the time. I mean, you always have people who you can get motivated for it as well, but a chunk of others will just sit there and be like, okay, when is this over?
Yes, yeah. I think it's good to have balance, for sure. At least for me. I think some people are so motivated by children and just, and like that's all they need to feel inspired. And I definitely, my soul my cup isn't full if I just do that. But also it's not full if I just perform. So I need to be bringing that music to people and, sort of inspiring the next generation as well. Yeah, so I feel like I need both things in my life to be fully fulfilled.
So you taught at that school. Did you also have a chorale or like a choir there?
Yes. So I taught sort of a general music appreciation class that anybody could join. And then I had a middle school choir and a high school choir. Oh. So the middle school choir was quite large, about 50 or 60 kids, and then depending on the year. And then I had a select group of just the freshmen and sophomores in the high school because I shared the position with another person. Mm-hmm. So she had the juniors and seniors, and I had the freshman and sophomore choir, and that was about 25 girls. And so, and occasionally we would join with the older students for a sort of a bigger group. So yeah, we did a bunch of concerts, and I would actually bring them into New York City every year on a little tour to my church, to Holy Trinity, so they could sing in the space and sing with the organ. We did a Britten Missa Brevis, which is a lovely piece for treble voices and organ, so we did it there with the organ, and so that was always fun because it's not far away, but just to sing in that space is really nice.
Yeah, I feel like those chances are always what you really remember out of school.
Yeah.
Like those experiences.
Yeah, even just getting on a bus and going somewhere different. And the church is so beautiful because it's right across the street from Central Park and right down the street from Juilliard and Lincoln Center. So there's so much to see all in that neighborhood. So it's a really nice sort of environment.
Cool. I'm just imagining, because you also said when I auditioned that high school choirs might focus differently than we might do in Europe. I mean, I don't know if we can exactly compare it because I'm kind of okay at sight reading. And you were like, oh, you're really good at sight reading.
Yeah, it seems like there's a difference based on my experience with Barrett here, who came in and really nailed the sight reading that many people struggled with. It really depends on what part of the country you are in America, how good people are at sight singing. But in general, I think part of it is probably that you played an instrument. And a lot of American students in choir have never played an instrument. And they also usually come up through a school system where they have many different teachers, and there's not sort of one universal idea about teaching them to read music. So if they grow up, so Texas is sort of the best state for sight reading, funnily enough. And it's because the standards of teaching in Texas require teaching solfege, like very early on. And that is carried through in all of the levels of school. And there's also a really rigorous all-state program where you can audition to be in this really exciting choir in Texas, but you have to be able to sight read to be able to get into it. Oh, okay. So there's sort of this incentive. So every student from Texas I've ever taught is a very strong sight reader.
That's so interesting.
But in New York State, not so much, just because I think it's not codified. And we're often just teaching to the concert, like just trying to get all of the music learned, and usually our music is not Bach.
Yeah.
And so you can teach it by rote. Like, you can't really teach Bach by rote, or you can, but as we're learning in chorale, it takes a really long time to get through it. And so then teachers just won't do it. So I think it's this perpetuating cycle. But I tried to change it when I was at the school. I think my students did pretty well with sight reading, but you don't know.
Yeah, that's so interesting that it really depends a lot on the state. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah, because every state has its own sort of guidelines for the curriculum and how things are tested and evaluated in terms of teachers. So I think in some states, teachers can sort of do whatever they want in the music classroom, but some places have really strict guidelines as to the curriculum. And there's complaints on both sides of that,
It's... But I mean, I didn't learn like sight reading in school.
Exactly.
I mean, in Germany, a lot of the hobbies happen outside of school.
Right.
That's like a fundamental difference as well. And I had one choir conductor from age 6 to age 18.
Exactly. So you had this consistency.
I had this one school, so to say.
Yeah, and everybody who was there most of the people at least wanted to be there, but in a school environment, often, like my middle school chorus was about half students who were required to take choir. And so to spend a huge amount of time teaching those students solfege when they're literally never going to use it again in their life, I think that's worth it for the half of the choir that is going to continue to use it. But I think many teachers end up thinking, okay, well, that's just a waste of my time. I should just let them have fun and teach them, the song quickly. But then you sort of lose the kids who really want to learn it or would benefit from learning how to read music. So it's a really difficult position that teachers find themselves in because, they're often teaching students who've had no musical background at all, and are being forced to be there. And so the way to win them over is not to teach them, do, re, mi, fi, sol, or whatever, modulations and whatnot. Yeah. But, it's difficult.
But it's also, I feel... I mean, you can say it's like you force people to be there, but it's also exposing people to music that don't have the chance otherwise.
Yes, of course.
So, I mean, that's kind of a pro thing, like a positive thing about having a lot of the hobbies in school, because you can reach more people. And for my choir, you had to come in the evening again into the music school, which is separate. You have to pay extra.
Wow.
We had choirs in school too, but at some point we arrived at the point where the choirs would steal each other, the people, and both would be very, very small in numbers because we were a small community. But everything has its pro and cons.
Yes, and I loved, and there was that odd student who would come in having never sung in choir before and just completely fall in love with it. Or was so talented.
Those stories are so important.
Yeah, so I think, ultimately, I think the spirit of it, which is just like, let's just get them singing instead of let's teach them how to read music. Yeah. I think that makes total sense because you're trying to inspire them first and then teach them later. Yeah. But I think the problem is that then they somehow never get taught. We used to get stuck in the inspiring them stage, and we never get them to the but you actually have to practice.
Yeah. So the just to clarify, solfege. Is that the
solfege? Yes.
Is that the do re mi?
Yeah. So you all probably think of it like fixto solfege, where A on the piano is always la.
That's one thing I learned. The absolute names like C, D, E first.
Oh, okay.
Because I learned instruments.
Right.
And then I learned the do, re, mi stuff in school later, and it always confused me.
Yeah.
It was not it was somehow more confusing for me, so I'm not as fluent anymore, and we don't do it as much. I feel like other countries do it way more.
Yeah, well,
technique.
So did you ever do movable do, where depending on the key, then do is C and C major.
Yeah.
Do,
I think that was the idea of the teacher,
Gotcha.
that you can just do the scales from any note.
Yeah. I think it's really helpful when you have students who've never played an instrument because, you can sort of visualize the half and whole steps, on your viola or on your violin. It's hard for me to imagine because I started on piano, but I try to imagine if I'd never seen an instrument at all, like how you would feel those notes in your voice, how you would understand the distance between them or how they relate to one another without like a keyboard in your head or so I think solfege is a really good way to do that, but it's also hard. It's like practicing,
Yeah. So moving from school to maybe this school here. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the program we are singing right now in chorale for the concert in November. Which will be in the past when this comes out.
Yes.
But
it's coming up really soon. I'm constantly on my mind. Yes.
We are singing a bunch of super interesting different pieces, and one of them is also a Bach cantata. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that process, because we are singing in German, which is super interesting for me.
Yes.
But because I can also see like the language from a different perspective. But what is your approach to teaching that, or also because you've been singing Bach for a longer time, what was your entry to singing in German and singing Bach?
Yeah, so on the concert, I started with the Bach cantata because I thought it would be valuable for everybody to sing sort of one larger work. And typically they've done like a Mozart mass or something like that with a small orchestra. But as I mentioned, we have a small choir this year, and so I tried to think of something that would work well with a smaller ensemble. And, obviously Bach came to mind, and I thought any excuse to do Bach, right? I think I can justify it easily. And I picked my favorite cantata because I've sung it a number of times, but I've never actually conducted it. So this is Cantata 4, Geschlagen Todesbanden. And I started thinking about, sort of the themes of the cantata, which are, to me, it's about, freedom. It's an Easter cantata, and the tenor movement where Jesus sort of bursts forth from the gates of hell. That was sort of my inspiration for the rest of the program. So I picked, for the first half, shorter pieces that all have to do with sort of freedom or breaking free from something, transitions and moving on, going home, sort of all of those ideas. So we have a gospel piece, a spiritual, we have a little round about a bird taking flight. We have this piece by a member of Sweet Honey in the Rock, which is this wonderful gospel trio called Wanting Memories. Of course, I'm blanking. Oh, we have a In Manus Tuas by Shepherds, so some Renaissance music. So it's all sort of all over the map, which I think is really important sort of in an educational setting to show, a bunch of different genres. But the German is definitely, challenging, I would say, to teach. We've learned the whole, first movement on do first. But I think it's good to get the notes in their heads first. And then I would never dream of doing it in English because I'm sure a translation exists out there that people have done. But to me, Bach is just like, the motives are so tied to the German text. So I think it's important for them to learn that. And to me, now German feels really second nature to sing Bach in, but in the conservatory where I studied at Eastman, we have a really full immersive language experience, which I think many voice majors do. So freshman year, we learn Italian, sophomore year, German, and junior year, French. And you spend a full year studying not only the language, but also how to pronounce the language. So even if I can't tell you what every German word means, I can tell you exactly how to say it, or mostly, 9 times out of 10. So I feel comfortable teaching that, at least, especially since I learned German as a non-German speaker. I think then I feel more equipped to teach people who've never spoken it before how to...
sometimes you need other bridges to pronounce it. Like,
exactly.
Hey, it's like this word, and I wouldn't have thought of that.
Right, like how to do the ich laut is so hard for non-German speakers, but I had a great teacher who taught us. Her trick was always you're saying... you're calling to your friend Hugh across the room and you say, Hugh, quietly. and that always gets it because American speakers always want to see the CH and go like, Yeah,
or there's an S suddenly.
Yes, or like the sh, like ish. And so, so I try.
Yeah, but that's always interesting, that change of perspective. I'm doing a lot right now, not just in chorale, of course, also in other courses, how things are taught. And I think I'm benefiting from it a lot.
Yeah.
Super interesting. And also, just generally, we can transition into what value his music has here. Because, I mean, he's German, and I study in Leipzig, so he's
right.
like next to the other few composers who were also in Leipzig, because we have a bunch.
Yes.
And with the printing, music printing, and all that stuff that's also happened in Leipzig. Of course, Bach is still like the person number one.
Yeah.
Also like in marketing and everything, of course. But it's different here. What is kind of the American perspective on all of that? Because you mentioned that you have the scene in New York with original instruments.
Yeah, I think there's a really big Bach contingency actually in America. I did a little research on this recently, knowing that you might ask me about it. And it was actually really fascinating. So, because I knew that there's actually a big sort of Bach program in Pennsylvania, of all places. There's this society called the Bethlehem Box Society, which I've known about because that is, I believe, like the oldest organization just devoted to Bach in the U.S. But there was a huge German sort of center there. So the Moravian community that came over from Germany, I think this is in the 1800s. So they sort of set up shop there and did a lot of performing of Bach once the revival sort of happened. But also, I guess there was huge amount of Bach in Boston, was a really big place where he sort of took off in the 1800s. And then that sort of trickled all around as, you know, conductors started traveling. So I know the Oratorio Society of New York, which I worked with when I lived in New York as well, which is this big chorus. They did, I believe, the first ever performance of B minor Mass in America. But then everybody started doing B minor Mass. So it sort of became like this thing that all the American choirs were doing, and it spread like wildfire. So as soon, you know, we got bit by the Bach bug, yes, you could say, and it kind of went everywhere. And now there's a bunch of places that do sort of a Bach Vespers type thing. So I know Holy Trinity was the first place to do Bach in the context of the liturgy, but now there's a lot of places that do it. I'm thinking there's the other Trinity Church in New York, Trinity Wall Street, and they have a Bach at One series, or they do multiple cantatas sort of in a prayer service setting every week. And there's a bunch of places in Boston as well. And most of these places now do this with period instruments. So I think that the period instrument thing has actually opened up a lot of doors to some places because it's cheaper to do it with one per part, you know? So yeah. I think that was actually really freeing for some organizations, because even if you don't do one per part every Sunday or every week, if you do it once in a while, that's a huge budget saver, right? To kind of cut down on your roster. And there's tons of early music ensembles in Philadelphia, in Houston. On the West Coast, we've got the Portland Baroque Orchestra, Seattle Baroque Orchestra. So there's lots of sort of early music camps popping up all over. And I think that really took off when the early music programs started at Juilliard and Yale specifically. So the teachers there, they did the thing where they went over to Europe and learned how to play or they migrated here from Europe and they brought their skills on the Baroque violin or whatever. Monica Huggett is the founder of the Juilliard program. So she came over here and brought her amazingness. But now we have this whole generation of students who are graduating from these programs, and they're terrific. And so they're starting their own ensembles, or, you know, places that used to play on modern instruments are now able to find all the people they need for the cantatas to be on period instruments. So it's really taken off, I think, in the past 20 years especially.
And it's still a growing scene, probably.
Oh, definitely. Yes. Yeah. Very, very much a burgeoning scene, and more places are adding programs. So, you know, now at Eastman we have an early music certificate that was not there when I was an undergrad, for example. So it's definitely taking hold a lot of places.
Yeah, I think it's even still growing in Europe as well. Mm-hmm. Just if you look at the last decades and the recordings that come out of all those times.
Yes.
Like we still have, like in the family, we still have an older Christmas oratorio recording that is very grand, I would say. And the new recordings are not like that anymore. And I mean, what's also so fascinating that right now it's probably like the Montevideo Choir and Gardner, which are the most, maybe prolific recordings right now. Probably, at least we work with them in our studies a lot. Yeah. And that's also definitely not a German choir. So
right.
That's so interesting how Bach on the one hand transcends a lot internationally and also seems to work in all those recordings still. Mm-hmm. Like you have the older ones that are not as historically informed, but we still listen to them every Advent. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you don't need to play Bach on period instruments for it to still be moving. And that's, like you said, it transcends all of that. I think if you get the spirit of what he's trying to say, then it doesn't matter what you're playing it on. The sort of emotion of each moment, if you can communicate that on whatever instrument you're using. I mean, it's even like hearing the boys sing, sometimes you get little children singing and they don't have any, some of the ones I've heard sing, the little chorale in St. Matthew Passion, for example, sometimes I've heard really amazing choirs sing that, and sometimes I've heard really a just okay choir singing that, but every time it gets me because of what, it's the symbolic nature of that moment.
Yeah.
Also,
part of the chorale pieces were meant to be sung with all the people.
Right, just with the average person. So they had to sound
well
exactly.
with everyone.
Yes.
So, yeah. And one question that connects with that is that the box that was here last week is there now, and it connects to the historic instruments as well. Yes. Maybe you can elaborate that.
Yeah, so sitting behind Barrett right now on the ground is a keyboard, an electric keyboard that I just took out of the box to test out because we don't have a harpsichord on campus and we don't have an appropriate organ on campus either. So Bob, who is the normal director here, said he bought this keyboard because it had a really convincing harpsichord and organ setting, and I tried it out today and he's right, it's pretty good. So we will be using an electric keyboard for our performance, and I'm sure that somebody would shudder at that, but I sort of feel like, I sort of ask myself, is it better to say, okay, we have this, and I'm going to make this work, or to not perform Bach at all, right? And so an electric keyboard is much better to me than not performing it at all. Yeah. And there is an organ here in our chapel that we could use, but it's not a good organ for Bach, and the sight lines would be very difficult. So yeah, we're going to go with that. I have tested it out, so now I can officially say we will do the organ setting on the electric keyboard.
Yeah, I think the organ, just as many organs in the United States probably are more equipped for the romantic pieces. I've seen a lot of their programs here are later works.
Exactly. Yes, it's not meant to play continuo for sure.
Yeah.
So
and that's also something for the German listeners important to remember. Yeah, the organs are built later.
Yes, yeah, and many churches don't even use their organs in the U.S. So there's often organs there, but especially in the Catholic Church, they often use piano instead, which is sort of something I vehemently disagree with because I don't think that helps the congregation to sing as much as an organ, but it's definitely a trend. So people got rid of their organs, or they only have electric organs, but all the places that kept really good organs usually did so because it's a beautiful romantic instrument, and not because it was, a little tracker organ that's perfect for Bach. So there's a shortage of those in the area, I would say, and most places.
Like, technology is getting better.
Oh, yes.
We have options.
I sang an amazing St. John Passion that utilized an electric portative organ, and it was amazing. I want one because at the click of a button, I didn't even realize it was electric because it had such good sound, and you could click a button to transpose it from A415 to 440 and change the temperament. So you could have it in mean tone, or it was amazing. So the amount of time you would save tuning, I think it's great. So I want one of those.
At the time this comes out, we will be a few days from Christmas. It's kind of weird to imagine it now. You said it snowed earlier.
It did
so
snow
we have
today.
To take that spirit right now.
Yeah, for about 30 seconds there were snowflakes in the air. Yes.
To talk about this topic of Christmas, I'm also so excited to share the new fact. I have to share that fact because I'm so excited for it. And that is the fact that you have never sung the Christmas oratorio.
I have never sung the complete Christmas oratorio, no.
And that is probably mind-blowing for all the Germans right now because we sing that every year. We basically switch between 1 to 3 and 4 to 6, and that's what we do every Christmas or at every Advent.
Yeah, I have sung St. Matthew Passion multiple times, St. John Passion multiple times, B minor Mass multiple times, Magnificat maybe 6 times, but I've never sung the complete Christmas oratorio. I definitely did a few of them. Once it was a series at Trinity Wall Street, and they were doing it over a few days, but I could only do one of the days. It is just not really part of our culture here to do Christmas oratorio. So I told that to Barrett the other day, and she was absolutely shocked.
Yeah.
so I can tell you, I couldn't tell you exactly why, but I'll tell you my theory, which is sort of a convergence of factors. The first thing is that the thing to do at Christmas time in America is Handel's Messiah. And I think that has sort of become our tradition, or maybe it was even our tradition before Bach sort of got established in the United States. So that's a possibility why that's sort of the more popular choice. But I think if that's the case, then it never changed because Messiah is in English, so people, can at least understand it. Or, Christmas oratorio is a lot of German to sit through. But, I mean, so is St. Matthew Passion, and people sit through that all the time during Easter season, so I don't know. But also, it's, I think, harder to put together Christmas oratorio because there's the different, instrumentation for each of the cantatas and sort of different soloist needs. And Messiah is a little bit more of a standard, orchestra, and you can just do the Christmas part and save the others for later. So I think there's a practical aspect to it. And if you're thinking about what choirs in America are going to be capable of singing it, like my Bach Choir, we would have probably loved to do it, but that would have been very long to do in the middle of a service. And we take off for the Christmas season. So, we sing on Christmas Day and then that's it. So we couldn't spread the cantatas out over the Christmas season. So that would never sort of work for us. But budget-wise, if you were using, a community chorus, it would cost a lot of money to get that sort of ensemble together. And it's long and it's a lot of German to teach, an average American person to sing. So I think people just end up defaulting to Messiah because it's in English. So that takes out that factor. But maybe I'll try to start the resurgence of a Christmas oratorio. Maybe I'll be that person that says, why do we always do Messiah? Let's do Christmas oratorio.
Yeah. I mean, and it's also, in Germany, it's also very much part of the education. And it's also not the case here, right?
No.
It's just not present, really.
Not present almost at all. Even I, who could, a self-described obsessed with Bach person, I have never really sat down and just, hung out with Christmas oratorio for a while, listening to it over and over. At Christmas time, I'm definitely going to do it this year since we've talked about it. But, I'll listen to it once in a while. But it's not the thing playing while I decorate my tree or something,
Oh, because that's exactly the case with my family does. Yeah, we listen to that one recording. Or I think it's a CD where the main arias and chorus pieces are on, and then we decorate First Advent.
I think for us, it's definitely the thing that sort of comes around at Christmas is Messiah, but also the Lessons and Carols service, which is a tradition out of England at King's College. They broadcast it on Christmas Eve, and they do these 9 readings that have to do with Christmas, and it's interspersed with sort of Christmas carols and anthems sung by the choir. So a lot of churches here in every denomination do lessons and carols. So that's always what I listen to when we do the tree. We either do Messiah or we do, all of these sort of carol arrangements and things, usually out of that lessons and carols tradition. Because King's College, who does that, they usually commission a new piece every year. So there's lots of sort of modern music, but also all the old good ones from back in the day, Yeah,
when I think about it, it's kind of the same that it's not as easy to perform. So I guess when I say we do it every year, it's the bigger choirs and you need mixed voices. And I also sung until I was 18 in a girls only choir. We did other stuff and more carols as well.
Yeah.
And stuff from all over the world. But then once you graduate into the mixed voices choirs, church choirs. I sang in a Bach choir for 1 year, and then our university choir in Leipzig is pretty big, and it's also connected to the church,
right? To
the university church, so they do Christmas oratorio all the time. I couldn't because of COVID.
Oh no! So we have this in common that we haven't sung Christmas oratorio yet.
That's always frustrating because I somehow never managed, although it's everywhere.
It will happen for you. Maybe we should set a bet or something to see which one of us gets to sing it first, Finally, we'll let each other know.
I'm counting on the year I return to next year. Yeah, I'm hoping for it.
Okay, good.
But another thing why it's also very, very present, a lot of secondary teachers choose the first movement, to introduce Baroque music in schools.
That's so funny.
That one piece, I've heard it from multiple people that they Because you have the timpani and the brass all of those markers for Baroque music. They always use that one.
That's a good one. I mean, that is one that I have sung. I would say that American choirs often excerpt from Christmas oratorio, so they'll do that one movement. Like, that's a great one, because that's not too hard. And it does have the timpani and the brass, which is so Christmassy, you know. So, you know, I think some American choirs know that one. I think it's just the length and the amount of German that they would have to tackle. Yeah. The other thing, you know, that's interesting that I hadn't thought about, but Christmas concerts are difficult because usually people, like American choirs, have a fall concert and then a Christmas concert. And so you usually have limited time to learn your Christmas concert music. And so to do all of that German and all of the coloratura stuff, you know, is hard when everybody already knows Messiah. And so you can just bring it out and we all know it already. So I think it's a lot of practical reasons, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it.
Are the choirs connected to churches everywhere? Or is especially like the Bach scene more of a music scene than a religious scene? So
the Bach scene is almost all a music scene. So Holy Trinity is so unique because that choir is connected to a church technically, and we do it in the service, but that's really rare. Most choirs that are singing Bach cantatas are professional choirs, or there's community choruses. I can't think of very many places where you have a church choir that sings Bach regularly. Like, even at my church job, I don't do Bach with them almost at all because it's a Catholic church, and so we don't really have a German tradition. So all the stuff we sing is Latin or English. So I think it doesn't happen in churches as much. So that, you know, I think that's another reason.
I guess that's another big difference as well. Because I think a lot of church choirs in Germany do a lot of Bach, the Protestant ones.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Least, of course. I think the others do too sometimes.
Yeah.
And that depends a lot on the region where you are in Germany.
Right, yeah.
But, yeah, I started singing the bigger works in the Bach Choir, which is church choir. Church community.
Yeah,
choir.
So like Bethlehem Bach, which is one I mentioned before, is it's just a community choir, so it's not affiliated with a church or anything. So so most of the Bach choirs are not tied to a church. So they don't perform very often. You know, it's like 3 or 4 concerts a year at most.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember we had, and I think many choirs do that, you have like smaller performances connected with church services for specific days. Like, we have a ton of free days throughout the year that are religious, and I kind of miss them now. Yeah. For example, in Germany they had Monday off.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's
a religious free day.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, All Souls it would have been. Or All Saints. Yeah. Okay, interesting. So like public school and everything has off. Yeah. Oh, wow.
It depends a little bit on the region, because some regions are more Catholic and some regions are more Protestant, and some, especially the East, the religion isn't as powerful, so to say, anymore. Okay. But yeah, there are a lot of free days, and for those sometimes we had like performances in the church. But then the bigger concerts were like St. Matthew. And Christmas.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah, when I taught, we got some days off. So we would get Good Friday off at my private school, and also the Jewish High Holy Days, because we had a big Jewish population. But yeah, I sometimes miss those days off. Yeah, especially the ones when you don't have the, like on Good Friday, I was always working. You know, I would always just take a gig, you know, singing St. John or whatever. But the days when it was a religious obligation that I didn't have, that was really nice.
Yeah, a short breather in between.
Yes, exactly.
So I have one last question.
Yes.
We always like to ask it because we get the greatest and funniest stories out of it.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite anecdote from any point of your career where you thought this would be funny to share or like great to share?
Yeah, you know, I have so many that I could share. I'm going to settle on the one. This was a funny but also fun memory. So for one of our season openers for Bach Vespers, we did Singet dem Herrn one on a part, which is the Bach motet. And it's 8 people, and we had instruments doubling, but 1 per part, 1 instrument, 1 voice. And they'd never done that, I think, at the church before. And so I was singing the first soprano part, and there is this crazy long melisma. And when you sing with 3 people, you can take a breath somewhere and it's fine. But when you sing by yourself, you have to find a place to breathe. That makes sense. And there was just this one line, and if anybody listening has ever sung it, you can probably think of what the line is. But I could never get through it without having to breathe. And even in the dress rehearsal, it completely fell apart. It didn't fall apart, but I just had to stop singing for like a measure to breathe. And all you can hear is me at that point. It's just me by myself. So on the way to church, I walked through Central Park singing it out loud over and over, practicing. And then I got to the church and we had a run through and it went fine. And it was the first time I did it. I worked so hard on it. And I was like, okay, I can do this. And then in the actual performance, we were having so much fun. And I got to that line and I was like, here I go, I'm ready. And I entered a whole bar early. and so it was just a mess. But then I came back in and it was fine. But what was so funny about that performance was that because it's in the middle of a service, nobody claps at the end. But the end of Sing dem Herrn is so exciting. You get the high B flat, I think is Hallelujah. And we finished and all of us were like smiling so big. And it just felt so wrong that nobody clapped. And so I spun around in a circle and then we all walked off because I was like, I have to do something with this amazing energy. I think that's why I love Bach. It just makes me so happy. So even though I messed up that one lick, I still felt happy with the performance. And I'm happy to say that I think it was 2 years later we did it again and I made it through without having to breathe. So you do get better if you practice these things, is what I'll say.
That's the moral.
Yes, the moral of the story. I thought I should give a teachable moment since I am your teacher after all. Yeah.
Wonderful. Do you have any future projects or anything you would like to advertise for? That this would be the moment. Also, where can people find you online? We will link stuff. We can link anything.
Sure, yes. So, right now my life is in a state of flux because I'm, applying to jobs post-doctorate. Mm-hmm. So this is only a year position that I'm in right now. So I have no idea where I'll be in the future. But I have a website, which is annalenti.com. So just my full name.com. And you can see me there. I don't know if I have any videos of Bach on there, but I definitely have some Monteverdi that you can watch if you want to hear me sing, and some I think I have a Bach cantata that I'm conducting up there, which is nice. And in terms of things coming up, I'm not sure anybody can really tune into these things, but maybe you can via live stream. I'm conducting the Beethoven Mass in C major at Eastman on December 3rd, although you probably would have already aired this, right?
Yeah, that's already done.
Already done.
But we wish you all the best.
Thank you. That will be good. But then in April, actually, I'm going to be singing at Baldwin Wallace Conservatory. They have a Bach festival.
Oh, nice.
So they had contracted me back in 2020, right before COVID hit, so I didn't end up getting to do it. And now 2 years later, I get to finally go back and do Bach festival. So I don't know what I'm singing yet, but it will be up on my website when that's there. And I'm sure there will be a live stream that people can tune into. So that's definitely sort of the big thing I have coming up in the spring. Also, if anybody happens to be in New York City over the holidays, I am singing a Grichaninoff piece with the Clarion Music Ensemble. I can send links to this as well. Mm-hmm. But we're singing on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day in New York City. So that'll be really fun. And we'll be releasing a recording of that as well. So you'll be able to, I'll be one of many sopranos, but you'll be able to hear me in theory on that recording when it comes out. So
nice. So just a bunch of things to look out for.
Yes.
Especially because there will be people listening from Germany, but I will try to advertise this here as well.
Yes.
So maybe some people will be actually there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this leaves me to advertise now, namely this podcast. We are going to continue producing episodes next year, both in Leipzig and beyond now. And in fact, the next guests are already scheduled, so look forward to that. For new listeners, we upload new episodes on the last Sunday of every month. But you're very welcome to follow us on social media to catch all the news. And for example, one of the news might be when the next episode in English will come out, because I will definitely do some more. And with that, we are at the end. I had so much fun. I hope you had too.
I did. Thank you so much. And I hope to get back to Leipzig one day.
Yeah, and I hope everyone listening to this had fun as well. Thank you for sharing all your interesting stories. And
You're
the
so
only
welcome.
thing left to say is Merry Christmas at the time this comes out. And we hope you will have a wonderful time with families and friends. In German, we also wish guten Rutsch, which means a good slide into the next year.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And to the German students, good luck on the exams next month. To the Americans, enjoy your winter break. We all need it. And see you in spring semester. Kito, ein Musik-Podcast für zwischendurch.